Hi, I'm JB, and welcome to Eagle's Nest Outdoors. It's time for another gear review, and this time I want to talk about a couple of different backpacking stoves. Now, there are a lot of different types of camp stoves on the market, so when I set out to pick some backpacking stoves, I had a couple of parameters in mind. Obviously, as a backpacking stove, size and weight are important. Now, I know that a lot of gas fuel stoves, like the MSR and Jetboil brands, the stove itself is tiny. You could fit that sucker in your pocket. But that's where my second parameter came in. I did not want my time in the field to be limited by the amount of fuel that I could carry. Now, with those aforementioned gas stoves, that isn't necessarily an issue for a weekend outing. But it could be a factor for a week-long trip, or even in a bug-out scenario where fuel may need to last for an indeterminate or even indefinite period of time. So that got me looking at a number of different stick-burning stoves. Granted, this works for me because I live in a highly wooded region of the country. If I lived somewhere where wood was less easily available, I might be thinking about this very differently. Anyway, there are a great many reviews out there of the Biolite and Solo stoves. So I got one of each. It is worth noting that this is the Gen 1 Biolite and this is the Solo Titan, which is not the smallest one they make. I also got a few inexpensive fold-up stick burners. I also took a long and hard look at the Kelly kettle, and I may still pick one up. If I do, I'll let y'all know how it compares to these, but its primary function is as a kettle slash thermos kind of thing. It does have a way to attach a stove aperture to the top, but it looks cumbersome to me, and other reviewers have actually confirmed that, so it wasn't at the top of my list. So, if you haven't looked into stoves like this before, the Biolite and the Solo, and even the Kelly kettle, work on a volcano stove principle. The convection currents cause more air to cycle into the burn chamber, and you get a hotter fire, less smoke, and a more efficient burn of your fuel, which, in this case, is whatever sticks, pine cones, etc. you can feed it. It's worth noting that while the Solo does this by virtue of its design, that the Biolite does it by using those currents to charge a battery and run a fan that feeds air into the burn chamber. This battery can be tapped to charge other devices too, which is a nice add-on feature. Obviously this thing is much less engineered than the other two, but it is trying to use the same principles of drawing air up from below as hot air rises to feed your fire. So, I ran an experiment with all three of these to get some good comparisons. I set each up with a pile of roughly the same amount of wood, split from the same log even, all prepared with my new bushcraft knife by the way, but that's a different review. Then I got a fire started in each and perched a canteen cup filled with 2 cups of water on top of each. I did this with all three stoves simultaneously so that weather conditions are not a variable. Then I just kept feeding them until that water started to boil. Here's what I found. The Biolite and the Solo were the easiest to get going and to keep going. With the fan on its low setting, the Biolite got boiling in about 7 minutes. I actually did another experiment a little later with its high setting, and it only took half as much time, which was impressive. The Solo took about 11 minutes, and only used the tiniest bit more fuel than the Biolite. It's worth noting that because of the built-in grate at the bottom, that small kindling, like shavings, will fall through, but this is easy to overcome by using feather sticks. In terms of feeding them, the Solo was super easy because of this gap in the shroud at the top. The Biolite was harder to feed. I was able to squeeze some sticks in past the canteen cup, but if I had a pot on top of this that was covering the top more evenly, I would probably have had to pick it up to get more fuel in there, and that would have slowed my cook time a little. Now, the folding stove was a little trickier to get going and to keep going. I pretty much had to feed it constantly, which if I had been doing from the start instead of trying to deal with all three of them, I might have gotten a little better cook time. Its burn chamber is also much smaller than the others, obviously. It's worth noting that at its highest burn, this stove didn't even contain the fire. It was pouring out the sides and the whole 9 yards. So that could be a problem in some surroundings if there's other dry coverings on the ground or whatever. You know what I mean. In all, it took about 20 minutes to get a good boil out of this, and it used significantly more fuel than the other two, as you might expect. So, what can we say in conclusion? Obviously, the Biolite and the Solo are both more efficient stoves and are roughly equivalent in terms of performance. Though, as I found in its high setting, the Biolite can get some really great performance. I do also like its ability to charge a phone, tablet, GPS, or any other USB-powered device while it's running. But I feel the Solo makes up for all of that with its simplicity. This is a lot easier to set up, has fewer moving parts, which means fewer potential points of failure. Titan's also a bigger stove, and it takes up about just as much space in your pack as the Biolite, even with the pot that it can nestle inside of. However, this little folder cannot be ruled out. While it takes longer to get a boil and uses more fuel, it also takes up much less space, weighs less, and costs a fraction of the price. While each of these is upwards of $100, I got this little thing for less than 10. So, I like these stoves. And for an outing, I would likely pack one or both of them, depending on how many people are coming along. But I also think that a stove like this has its place. This is what I was talking about when I mentioned keeping an emergency stove in my vehicle a little while back. And this is what each member of my team has stowed in their 3-day bag, which is designed to give each of us essential tools and supplies in as little space as possible. This one, it's also worth mentioning, comes with a little bowl that can be fitted in here too, so you could use this as an alcohol burning stove if wood was not available. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide what best fits your needs. I hope I've given you some good information that may help you make a decision. If you've got comments about these or any other stoves, I'd love them to hear them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, stay safe and have fun.